The cold, sterile hum of the Elysium's engines reverberated through the metal walls, a constant reminder of the enormity of the mission ahead. Captain Tessa Green stood in front of the massive viewport, staring out into the black void of space. The stars were distant pinpricks of light, barely visible against the vast emptiness. Her mind wandered, not to the unknown dangers awaiting them in the final frontier, but to the quiet faces of those she was about to lead into the depths of that void. A crew of misfits, each with their own story, their own fears. She had seen what happened when missions like this went wrong, how isolation eroded trust and cracked even the most well-meaning teams apart. Behind her, the ship's crew was preparing for launch. Engineers scurried through corridors, finalizing systems, ensuring that every inch of the Elysium was ready for the journey ahead. The security team conducted drills, their footsteps heavy and deliberate as they reviewed every contingency. The scientists, led by the enigmatic Dr. Kai Tran, were already preparing the first of their experiments, analyzing star maps and calibrating their instruments. But it was the quiet presence of Tran that troubled Green the most. His focus on the mission, while admirable, hid something deeper, an obsession with uncovering the unknown, even at the risk of pushing the boundaries of safety. She had seen the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of the last expeditionary mission, his voice full of passion, but also something darker, a kind of hunger. "Captain, we're ready to begin the final checks," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Claire Roberts, her second in command, standing in the doorway. Clara's face was tense, her eyes flickering nervously as if unsure whether the enormity of what they were about to do had fully set in. "The launch window is closing." Green nodded, turning away from the viewport. "I'll be there in 5 minutes. Give them the go-ahead." Clara hesitated, her voice softening. "You sure about this, Captain? You know, this mission could be the end of everything." Green held Clara's gaze. Her expression hardened, but inside, she too wondered if this was the right choice. The expedition was humanity's last shot at reaching beyond their own galaxy. The Elysium was humanity's final hope to explore the regions of space where no one had ventured. No one had returned from those realms, and Earth's resources were dwindling. Failure meant extinction. There would be no rescue, no backup. They were the last line of defense. "I'm sure," Green said, her voice unwavering. "We've been preparing for this moment our entire lives. We have to trust that humanity can handle the unknown. It's who we are." She turned and walked briskly toward the bridge, the weight of her decision settling like an invisible cloak around her shoulders. As she entered the control room, she could already feel the electric hum of the Elysium coming to life. The massive starship was a marvel of engineering, a testament to humanity's ingenuity. But as she settled into her captain's chair and looked at the crew manning their stations, her gaze lingered on Dr. Kai Tran. His sharp eyes met hers, and for a split second, Green saw something in his expression that sent a shiver down her spine. A silent promise that this mission was more than just exploration. It was a chance to uncover something far beyond anything humanity was ready for. "Captain," Dr. Tran said, his voice steady, but with a hint of something she couldn't quite place. "We've finished our initial scans of the region. There are anomalies, signals not of human origin." Green's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of signals?" Tran hesitated for just a moment, his fingers hovering over the terminal before him. "I can't be sure, but it's definitely not random. Someone, or something, wants us to find them." Green's pulse quickened, the implications of those words sinking in. Something was waiting for them out there. The final frontier was no longer just a blank space in the galaxy. It was a place where the unknown was alive, watching, waiting. "Prepare for launch," she commanded, her voice cool and decisive. "We leave in 10 minutes." As the countdown to launch began, Green looked back out the viewport, her thoughts swirling. She knew the dangers of venturing into the final frontier. No one had ever returned from it, and the risks were too great to ignore. But she had a duty to her crew, to Earth, to every soul that depended on this mission succeeding. There was no turning back now. The final expedition was about to begin. The Elysium hummed steadily as it slipped past the final boundaries of known space, its powerful engines propelling the ship toward the dark, uncharted regions of the galaxy. Through the viewport, the stars were no longer the familiar constellations that guided Earth's ships. Instead, they appeared as distant, almost unreachable pinpoints, as if they were beckoning the crew into an endless void. Captain Green stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the readouts and navigating the ship's trajectory, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled in her chest since the moment they left Earth's atmosphere. There was something about the unknown that felt suffocating, like the air had grown heavier with each passing second. The silence of deep space, usually a comforting constant, now felt like a living, breathing entity watching them. Waiting. Behind her, the crew worked diligently, some exchanging quiet words while others kept to themselves, lost in the gravity of their mission. It wasn't long before the first sign of trouble appeared. "Captain, we've detected an unusual energy surge on the scanners," reported Lieutenant Roberts from her station. Her voice was calm, but the underlying tension was impossible to miss. "It's coming from a nearby system. Should we investigate?" Green didn't hesitate. They were on a mission to explore the unknown, and this was their first real test. Set course to investigate. Let's see what's out there. As the Elysium altered its path, the energy signature grew stronger, more erratic, as if it were responding to their presence. The ship's lights flickered once, then twice. A deep shudder rippled through the vessel, followed by an eerie hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. That wasn't a system malfunction. Dr. Tran's voice came over the comms, his tone unsettlingly calm. "I've never seen anything like it. It's almost as if the ship reacted to the energy source." Green's brow furrowed, but she quickly pushed aside her growing sense of unease. They had to focus on the mission, no matter how strange things got. "Keep an eye on it. I want regular updates on the energy readings." As the ship continued its journey, the Elysium passed through a dense asteroid field, its systems pinging warnings as they narrowly avoided collisions. The ship's hull groaned as it weathered the strain, and the crew's nerves were stretched thin. It wasn't long before another incident occurred. This time, the ship's sensors detected a strange gravitational anomaly, a ripple in space itself. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to throw the crew into a state of heightened alert. The entire vessel seemed to lurch, as if it had collided with an invisible force. The systems flickered again, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. "All hands, brace for impact," Green shouted, her voice cutting through the panic that had begun to stir among the crew. The ship jerked violently, throwing some of the crew to the floor. Emergency alarms blared throughout the Elysium, and lights flashed in chaotic patterns. Green gripped the edge of the command console, steadying herself as the ship rocked. "Status report," she barked, trying to maintain control in the chaos. "We're caught in the anomaly's gravity well, Captain," Lieutenant Roberts yelled. "We're being pulled off course. Engines are struggling to compensate." Dr. Tran's voice crackled through the comms, his tone tinged with fascination. "It's not just a gravitational field. It's something more, a distortion in space-time itself. The energy surge, it's coming from there." "Where?" Green demanded. "Through the anomaly," Dr. Tran replied. "I think it's leading us somewhere. Something is pulling us toward it." Green's heart raced as she considered their options. The anomaly could be a trap, something ancient and dangerous, or it could be their gateway to the unknown, the very thing they had set out to find. Either way, they had no choice but to follow it. The ship's systems groaned in protest, and the crew fought to regain control, but the pull of the anomaly was overwhelming. "Hold on," Green commanded, her voice steely. "We're not backing down now. Push forward. we've come too far. The Elysium continued its descent into the distortion, its hull straining under the pressure as the crew held on for dear life. Every warning light on the ship blared as they crossed into the heart of the anomaly. The stars beyond the viewport began to twist and bend, the very fabric of space itself warping in front of their eyes. Suddenly, the distortion ceased. The ship was no longer shaking, no longer caught in the grip of the anomaly. The crew looked around in confusion. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The ship had passed through, but what was on the other side? Before they could answer that question, the sensors pinged with a new, even more urgent warning. A transmission had been detected. It was faint, crackling with static, but unmistakable. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate, and it was coming from the heart of the anomaly. Green stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. This was no coincidence. The journey into the unknown had begun, and they were not alone. The Elysium hung in the void, silent except for the steady hum of its systems and the soft murmurs of the crew. Every eye in the bridge was fixed on the main display, where the faint transmission had appeared. A series of broken signals, static-ridden but unmistakably deliberate. The message was there, hidden beneath layers of noise, and something about it felt urgent. "Captain," Dr. Tran's voice was low, almost reverent. "This isn't just random interference. It's encoded. The structure is too intricate for a natural phenomenon." Green's pulse quickened. The notion of a message, especially from the depths of the anomaly, sent a chill through her. For the first time, she began to wonder if they had made a mistake, if the unknown, which had once felt like a vast ocean of possibilities, was now something far more dangerous. "Is it alien in origin?" she asked, her voice tight with curiosity and caution. Tran hesitated, staring at his console. "It's hard to say. It's not in any known language, but the pattern is something I've seen before. There are similarities to pre-space age communication techniques used by early Earth civilizations. It's almost like an invitation." An invitation? The word echoed in Green's mind. An invitation from where? From whom? She exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Roberts, who was watching the signals with growing concern. "We need to decode it," Green decided, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Can you crack it, Dr. Tran?" Dr. Tran's fingers flew over the console, his eyes never leaving the screen. The lights of the bridge flickered as the ship's systems struggled to compensate for the energy drain from the anomaly. A tense silence fell over the crew as the transmission repeated itself, each loop more insistent than the last. "Give me a moment," Tran muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. The transmission flickered again, the static growing louder, almost as though it were pushing against the walls of the ship itself. Then, with a sudden, jarring clarity, the noise ceased, replaced by a single word. "Welcome." It was a single, crisp syllable, spoken in a voice that had a quality both alien and eerily familiar. The word hung in the air, reverberating throughout the ship's corridors. Green's breath caught in her throat. The voice, though distorted, seemed to reach them, as if it were coming from inside the very walls of the ship. Who is that?" Roberts whispered, her hand trembling as she adjusted the volume, trying to capture any other words. Another phrase followed, but it was softer, a low murmur barely audible over the static. The crew leaned forward, straining to hear. Then it came again, clear as day. "You are not alone." The words settled over the crew like a heavy fog, leaving a sense of dread and wonder in their wake. Green's mind raced. Not alone. The message was clear. Someone, or something, was watching them. They weren't the first to reach this part of the galaxy. The anomaly, the transmission, it was all part of something much larger than they had anticipated. This wasn't just an expedition. This was a contact. "Do we respond?" Roberts asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. Green turned to face her, weighing the risks. Responding could reveal their position, draw attention, or worse, lead them into a trap. But ignoring the message might be just as dangerous. The invitation, the welcome, it was too significant to dismiss. They were being called. Open a channel, Green ordered, her voice firm, though her insides churned with anxiety. Prepare to send a message back. Let them know we're here, but keep it simple. No specifics, just acknowledgement. A tense few moments passed as the crew scrambled to set up communication protocols. Finally, the connection was established. Green's voice, steady despite the growing fear within her, filled the silence. "This is Captain Tessa Green of the Elysium. We acknowledge your transmission. We are a human exploration vessel, and we seek peaceful contact." The crew waited with bated breath. The seconds felt like hours. There was no immediate reply, only the crackling hum of static in the background. Then, just as they were about to give up, the voice returned, clearer this time, its resonance filling the bridge. "Peace is relative." Green's eyes widened. The response was cryptic, ominous even. What did it mean? What did they want with humanity? Before she could process the meaning of the message, the ship's sensors began to alert. A new energy spike was emanating from the heart of the anomaly. Something was approaching. It wasn't just a signal, it was a physical presence. The Elysium systems flashed warnings as the space around them began to ripple once again, as though reality itself was warping to accommodate something new. "We need to brace for impact," Roberts said, her voice a whisper of terror. "Whatever it is, it's coming." Green's grip tightened on her chair. Her mind raced, trying to anticipate what was about to happen. They had crossed into a realm where the rules of space and time were malleable, where ancient forces could bend reality itself. And now, something was coming for them. "Ready the crew," Green ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is just the beginning." The Elysium shook as the energy surge from the anomaly intensified, sending warning lights flashing across the control panels. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, as if protesting the invisible force that was now pulling them deeper into the unknown. The once quiet and stable void of space was now alive with energy, the space-time distortion surrounding them rippling and warping like a storm about to break. "Shields at maximum," Captain Green ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. She gripped the armrest of her chair, her gaze fixed on the main viewport, where the stars began to warp, stretching and contracting in eerie patterns. It was as if the very fabric of space was folding in on itself. The crew scrambled, their movements tense and frantic, but even in the face of such an unknown, their training kept them focused. Lieutenant Roberts was monitoring the systems, her eyes darting between multiple readouts. "Shields holding, but they won't last long under this kind of strain," Roberts reported, her voice strained. "We need to get out of here or we'll be torn apart." Dr. Tran was at his station, fingers flying over his console as he tried to make sense of the readings. His face was pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. The energy signature, it's growing stronger, but it's also evolving. It's like it's adapting to us. Whatever's coming is alive, Captain. Before Green could respond, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew off balance. The lights flickered, and an unnatural wind seemed to howl through the hallways, even though the ship was in the vacuum of space. The stars outside twisted into jagged, fractured shapes, like shards of glass, and then everything went black. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The familiar hum of the Elysium systems had stopped, and the crew was left suspended in a strange, disorienting void. Captain Green blinked, trying to make sense of the sudden darkness. Her breath was shallow, and she could feel the weight of her heart pounding in her chest. "Status?" she demanded, her voice low and steady, though she could feel the anxiety creeping up her spine. We've dropped out of normal space," Lieutenant Roberts reported, her voice trembling. "We're no longer within the anomaly, but we're not back in known space either." "The stars," she paused, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Captain, the stars, they're gone. It's like we're in a completely different dimension." Green's heart skipped a beat. This was no longer just about exploring the unknown. They had crossed into something far more dangerous, a place where the rules of the universe no longer applied. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of the crew trying to regain their bearings. But then, just as they were about to speak, a sudden pulse of light erupted from the darkness outside. It was brilliant and blinding, unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive ethereal form began to emerge from the void, slowly taking shape, a vast, luminous structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Green's breath caught in her throat. The object was impossibly large, stretching across the black expanse like a giant nebula in the shape of a colossal ancient temple. Its surface shimmered with intricate symbols and patterns, some of which pulsed in time with the energy fluctuations that had previously enveloped them. It was clear now, the transmission, the energy surges, the strange messages, it was all leading to this moment. "What is that?" Lieutenant Roberts whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not just an object," Dr. Tran murmured, his voice reverent, almost awestruck. "It's a construct, an artifact, older than anything we've ever encountered. It's not from our galaxy." The crew was silent for a moment as they took in the vastness of the structure. It was not just a piece of technology, it was a monument, a relic from a time and place that was beyond human comprehension. Green stared at the structure, her mind racing. They had come here to explore the unknown, to push the boundaries of human understanding. But this was something else entirely. They were no longer in the realm of scientific curiosity. They had stumbled upon something far older, far more complex than any civilization or being they had ever imagined. "Captain," Lieutenant Roberts said, her voice filled with awe and fear, it's calling to us." Green's eyes narrowed as she looked at the object again. The light pulsing from its surface seemed to resonate with something deep inside her, as though it was reaching out, beckoning them toward it. For a moment, it was as if the ship itself had become part of the rhythm, an instrument in the grand symphony of the universe. "We're going to dock with it," Green said, her voice steady, though her mind was filled with questions. "We need to find out what it is, what it wants. Prepare the crew for boarding." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had come this far, past the anomaly, into this unknown, and now they stood on the edge of something beyond comprehension. The decision was made. "We have no idea what we're walking into," Lieutenant Roberts cautioned. Green looked at her, her eyes fierce with resolve. "It doesn't matter. We're not turning back now." With that, the Elysium slowly began its approach to the ancient construct, its systems fighting against the pull of the mysterious force that emanated from it. And as the ship drew closer, a single question echoed in Green's mind, growing louder with each passing second. What would they find inside? The Elysium inched closer to the colossal structure, its hull vibrating with a strange energy as the ship passed through what seemed to be a subtle but powerful gravitational field. It was as though they were entering the heart of something much greater than their ship, something alive in a way they couldn't yet understand. The eerie light from the structure bathed the ship in a cold glow, casting long shadows across the crew's faces. Approaching docking port, Lieutenant Roberts announced, her voice tense, yet calm with the precision of someone who had done this thousands of times. "Captain, this isn't like any docking procedure we've ever done before. It's not a traditional port, it's organic, almost as if the surface is moving." Green nodded, her jaw clenched in resolve. The ship's hull groaned slightly as if responding to the strange forces at play around them. The main viewport showed the structure's surface rippling, as if reacting to their presence. There were no visible hatches or airlocks, just an undulating, smooth surface that seemed to shift and form openings as they drew nearer. This was not a design that followed any known human engineering principles. It felt more like a living organism, alive and sentient, guiding them in. The silence aboard the Elysium was palpable. Only the hum of the ship's systems and the occasional beeping of consoles broke the tension. Every crew member, from the bridge to the lower decks, was on edge, awaiting the unknown that lay ahead. "We're almost there," Green said, turning to Dr. Tran. "What can you tell me about this thing?" Tran was at his console, running every scan he could, his eyes darting back and forth across the data pouring in. "The structure itself is like nothing we've ever encountered. The materials are unrecognizable. There's no known element that makes up its surface, but it's radiating a kind of harmonic frequency, almost like it's communicating in a language of waves and pulses." "And the energy?" Green asked. "Unstable," Tran replied, frowning at his screen. "It's fluctuating in ways that shouldn't be possible. One moment it seems like it's absorbing energy from us, the next it seems to be giving it back, almost like an exchange, but there's no consistency to the pattern." Green's thoughts raced. They were inside something older than humanity itself. The truth about what it wanted, what it was slipping further away, the answers only more cryptic with every passing second. Still, there was no turning back now. "Keep monitoring the energy," she instructed. "Roberts, prepare the team. We'll be ready to board in 5. Lieutenant Roberts nodded sharply. "Aye, Captain." Moments later, the ship's engines whined and hummed as they prepared to land on the strange, living surface of the structure. The Elysium floated inches from the opening, its docking clamps ready to engage. The crew stood ready, the weight of their task pressing heavily on their shoulders. A soft hiss echoed through the ship's corridors, and the airlock doors slowly slid open. A heavy, almost tangible atmosphere rushed in, the air thick with energy, yet oddly still. A sense of urgency filled the air. The crew knew this moment was one they would never be able to undo. As the landing clamps locked into place, the bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Prepare for landing," Green ordered, her voice resolute. "Everyone, suit up. We move in 10. The crew quickly donned their pressure suits, each step more measured than the last. Their breathing was steady but sharp, the weight of the moment making the air feel heavier than usual. The airlock opened with a hiss, revealing the inner sanctum of the structure, an organic, cavernous space that defied any standard of architecture they had ever known. The walls seemed to pulse with the same eerie light, alive and breathing, as if the very heart of the structure was alive. The floor beneath them was smooth and undulating, a living surface that shifted subtly as they stepped onto it. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing, drawing them in, urging them to move forward. "Stay close and stay alert," Green commanded, her voice now barely above a whisper as she led the way down a long corridor. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." The crew filed behind her, their footsteps muffled against the soft, undulating surface. The air inside was thick with a strange energy, as though the ship's crew was being absorbed into the very fabric of the structure itself. The walls seemed to ripple around them, shifting in response to their presence. Then, without warning, the corridor opened up into an enormous chamber, its size staggering. At its center stood an imposing structure, a towering monolith, its surface covered in intricate symbols and glyphs that seemed to shift and move, though no one could tell whether it was an optical illusion or a reality. The air in the chamber hummed, vibrating with energy, as though the entire room were alive. "Is that what we came here for?" Lieutenant Roberts asked, awe and fear mixing in her voice. Green's heart raced as she surveyed the monolith, her mind trying to make sense of it all. "I don't know," she replied, her voice steady, "but we're about to find out." As the team approached the monolith, the air grew even heavier, and then, just as they neared it, the symbols on the surface of the structure began to glow faintly, responding to their presence as if recognizing them. Slowly, the monolith began to open, revealing a swirling mass of light at its core. And then, a voice, deep and resonant, boomed across the chamber. "Welcome, travelers," it said, its tone echoing inside their minds. "You have crossed the threshold. Now you must choose." The voice reverberated through the chamber, vibrating deep within the crew's chests as if it were coming from the very air around them. The words were not spoken aloud, yet they were crystal clear, echoing within their minds with an ancient and powerful resonance. A chill ran down Captain Green's spine, but she held her ground, her eyes locked on the swirling mass of light at the center of the monolith. "Choose," Green repeated, her voice thick with disbelief and a touch of awe. "What choice?" The voice responded, not with words but with a sudden flood of images, overwhelming the crew's minds with visions. The chamber around them seemed to stretch and twist as the images unfolded, a vast civilization flourishing among the stars, its cities glowing with advanced technologies, a race of beings that appeared both familiar and alien. The images morphed quickly, showing the rise and fall of empires, worlds destroyed in flashes of brilliant light, entire galaxies consumed by darkness. And then the voice returned, now tinged with a note of urgency. "Your species stands at the precipice, Earthborn," the voice boomed. "You have found your way here, but you are not the first. Many have come before you, seeking knowledge, seeking power, but none have made it this far. And now, the decision rests with you." The visions began to shift, showing Earth and its people, humanity on the verge of a new age, its reach extending into the stars. But with that progress came conflict, strife, and war, factions rising to power, betrayals among allies, and destruction that threatened to undo all they had worked for. In the blink of an eye, the images shifted once more, showing humanity's potential: unity, peace, prosperity, a future free from the mistakes of the past. But then, the final image flashed across their minds, a terrifying vision. Earth, once a thriving hub of life, lay in ruins. Its cities shattered and burning, its people scattered and broken, reduced to nothing more than a memory in the vastness of the universe. "You must choose," the voice said again. "The path of enlightenment, where knowledge and power will be yours to wield, but at great cost, or the path of unity, where you will find the strength to overcome the challenges ahead, but at the cost of your independence. Each path leads to a different future, one that will shape the fate of your species." Green's heart pounded in her chest as she absorbed the enormity of what was being asked. A choice, but what did it mean? The voice had promised power and knowledge, but there was always a price. And the other path, the one of unity, seemed to promise something else, something far more uncertain. "Captain," Dr. Tran said, his voice shaky, this is beyond anything we've ever prepared for. How can we possibly know which path to take?" Green didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the visions. Her crew, humanity as a whole, they were on the edge of something far greater than they had ever imagined. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. The voice had shown them two futures, one of power and knowledge, the other of unity. But which was the right one? "Perhaps there is no right answer," Green said softly, her gaze never leaving the glowing monolith. "Maybe the choice isn't about what's best for us. Maybe it's about what we're willing to sacrifice." She turned to the crew, who stood silent, each person absorbed in the flood of images and thoughts that had overtaken their minds. They were all thinking the same thing, wondering if the choices presented were truly the only ones that mattered. Could they really make a decision with so little understanding of what lay on either path? The monolith pulsed again, the light from within growing brighter, more insistent. It was as if it could sense their hesitation, their uncertainty. Then the voice spoke once more, its tone colder this time. "Time is not a luxury you possess, Earthborn. Your species is not the first to be offered this choice, but your future will not wait. Make your decision now, or the opportunity will be lost. Choose wisely." Green felt a sense of dread seep into her bones. There was no going back now. The crew was counting on her to make a choice, to decide not just their fate, but the fate of humanity. "Captain," Lieutenant Roberts said, her voice firm but laced with worry, "what are we supposed to do? What do we choose? Green's mind was clouded with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Was humanity ready for the power the monolith promised? Could they handle it without losing their humanity, or was the path of unity the safer bet? No guarantees, but perhaps the only way to survive. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The choice felt impossible, but it had to be made. There was no turning back. With a steadying breath, Green turned back to the monolith. "We choose a future for humanity," she said, her voice resolute. "We choose unity." As soon as the words left her lips, the monolith's light flared brighter than before, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The voice boomed one final time, almost approving. "Then you have chosen, but the cost has already begun." The ground trembled again, and the crew braced themselves, their hearts pounding in anticipation of what would come next. The light from the monolith blazed brighter, so intense that for a moment the crew had to shield their eyes. The very air seemed to hum with power, vibrating the walls around them, and the ground beneath their feet shifted as if the structure itself were awakening in response to their decision. Captain Green gripped the railing in front of her, her heart racing as the tremors grew stronger. It felt as though the very core of the alien structure was reacting to their choice. "Captain!" Dr. Tran shouted, his voice barely audible over the rising noise. "The energy readings, they're off the charts. We've activated something we can't control." The monolith's surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and the light pulsed in waves, each one more intense than the last. The crew staggered as the vibrations intensified, their bodies feeling the full brunt of the energy surge. For a brief, terrifying moment, Green feared they might be torn apart by the sheer force emanating from the monolith. But just as quickly as the chaos began, it stopped. The chamber fell into an eerie stillness, the vibrations fading into an almost unnatural calm. The bright light dimmed, retreating into the heart of the monolith, leaving only the faintest glow around its surface. "We've done something," Green muttered under her breath, her eyes scanning the room. It felt as though the very air had changed, heavier, charged with an unknown presence. She could feel the weight of their decision pressing on her chest, but now, with the immediate danger past, she wasn't sure if they had made the right choice. The promise of unity was still there, but the cost, the price, had yet to reveal itself. The crew stood frozen, each member processing the event in their own way. Roberts clenched her fists at her sides, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Captain, what just happened? What did we activate?" Green's voice was steady, though she too was struggling to make sense of it. "I don't know, but we made a choice, and the consequences are already starting to unfold. We'll need to stay sharp. There's no telling what comes next." A deep rumble reverberated through the chamber, drawing their attention to the far side of the room. The walls began to shimmer, the once still surface of the monolith now glowing with intricate symbols that moved like living creatures. The symbols twisted and turned, rearranging themselves in patterns too complex to understand. It's reacting to us," Lieutenant Roberts said, her voice tinged with both fear and fascination. "I think we're being observed." "Stay focused," Green commanded. "Keep your wits about you. We don't know who or what is watching us, but we can't afford to make any more mistakes." The crew moved cautiously, each step echoing in the hollow silence of the chamber. The monolith's shifting symbols seemed to pulse with their every movement, as though it were tracking their progress. The once ominous hum had quieted, replaced by an almost intimate silence that seemed to press in on them. Then, without warning, a new sound broke the silence. A deep, resonating voice, different from the one they had heard before, but just as commanding, echoed in their minds. "You have chosen, but now you must prove your worth." The words struck Green like a physical blow. "Prove our worth," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What do you mean by that?" The voice did not respond immediately, but the symbols on the monolith flickered and shifted, forming a new sequence, a sequence that looked like a map, glowing with an unearthly light. The map displayed a sprawling network of corridors and chambers, stretching deep within the alien structure. A chill ran through Green's body as she realized what the map represented. It wasn't just the structure they had seen. It was a vast labyrinth of knowledge, a network of secrets buried deep within the monolith. "You must navigate the trials," the voice intoned. "The path to true unity is not without challenge. Only those who are worthy may proceed. Your decisions have set events in motion that cannot be undone. Prepare yourselves." Green's mind raced. Trials, challenges, what did that mean for them? What would they face as they ventured deeper into the monolith's labyrinth? The stakes were higher than ever now. They had chosen unity, but the cost of that choice was becoming clearer with each passing moment. "Dr. Tran, can you make anything of that map?" Green asked, her voice sharp as she snapped back to reality. Tran quickly scanned the holographic display, his fingers flying over his console. "It's hard to say," he said. "The map is constantly shifting, and the pathways aren't fixed. It seems like we'll have to adapt to whatever we encounter. We might be able to avoid some areas, but others we'll have to face head-on." "We've come this far," Green said, determination setting in. "We won't turn back now. Prepare yourselves for the trials ahead. Whatever we face together." As the crew gathered their resolve, they knew that their journey had just entered a new and far more dangerous phase. The path of unity was no longer a mere promise. It was a test that would demand everything from them. But they had made their choice. There was no turning back. The only way forward was through the trials that awaited them. And so, with the hum of the monolith still echoing in their minds, they began their descent into the heart of the alien structure, ready to face whatever challenges lay in wait. The future of humanity was at stake, and only by proving their worth could they hope to secure it. The crew stood at the threshold of the labyrinth, the faint glow of the monolith casting long shadows across the dark corridors that lay ahead. The map had faded from the air, leaving only a series of paths and trials for them to navigate. Every step now felt heavier, burdened by the knowledge that their choice had bound them to a fate that none of them fully understood. Captain Green's mind raced, but her face remained resolute. "Stay close and stay alert," she ordered, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gripped her heart. "We don't know what's ahead, but we're in this together." The crew nodded, their faces grim. Each person knew that the trials would test them, perhaps in ways they couldn't imagine, but they had no choice. The fate of humanity and the future they had chosen depended on what happened next. They moved forward, the walls of the labyrinth seemingly closing in around them as they passed into the first chamber. The air felt thick with the weight of the unknown, and the silence was unnerving. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to make the wrong move. The first challenge came without warning. A deep rumble reverberated through the ground, and the walls of the chamber shifted, revealing a vast, swirling vortex of energy at the center of the room. The vortex pulsed with a vibrant light, drawing them in with an unnatural magnetism. Green instinctively took a step back, but the vortex held them in its grasp. "Captain," Roberts called out, her voice shaky. "What is that?" "It's like it's alive." "It's a test," Green said, her voice firm. "This is part of the trial. We need to face it together. The trials will test our unity. If we falter, we'll fail." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Green's words gave them a semblance of direction. They had to stay together. If they split apart, if they allowed fear or doubt to tear them asunder, they would fail. The vortex rippled, its surface undulating like water disturbed by a stone. Slowly, a figure began to emerge from the energy, taking shape from the swirling light. It was a being of pure energy, its form shifting and flickering like an image on an ancient film reel. It was neither human nor alien, but something far older, an entity forged from the very essence of the monolith's power. You have chosen, the entity intoned, its voice resonating with the power of the monolith itself. But unity is not so easily attained. You must prove it through sacrifice, through trust. Only then can you proceed. Green clenched her fists, her gaze never leaving the shifting figure. What do you want from us? She demanded, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The entity's form rippled again, and it spoke once more, its voice now layered with ancient wisdom. Unity is not the absence of conflict, it said. It is the overcoming of it. Only through cooperation, through shared burden, can you achieve what you seek. To pass this trial, one among you must step forward and take the burden alone. Only one may proceed. A cold silence fell over the crew, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. The implications were clear. One of them would have to sacrifice themselves for the rest to move forward. No, Robert said immediately, her voice rising in defiance. We can't ask anyone to do that. We stay together. Green's heart tightened as she met Robert's gaze. I'm not asking anyone to make that choice, she said, her voice firm but soft. But we knew this wouldn't be easy. We can't move forward unless we're willing to make a sacrifice. Captain, Tran said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. What if we can find another way? What if there's something we missed? Green shook her head. I don't think there's another way. This is it. A wave of resolve washed over her, and her eyes scanned the crew. They were all strong, capable, but only one of them could make it through this trial. Only one of them could carry the weight of the choice. Captain, Roberts said, her voice tight with emotion. I'll do it. I'm ready. I've always been ready. Green's heart sank, but she knew what had to be done. No, I will be the one to go. But before Green could take another step, a voice rang out, clear, strong, and resolute. I will go. It was Lieutenant Ryan, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. I'm the one who made the choice with you, Captain, he said, his eyes unwavering. Let me carry the burden. I'll do it for all of us, for humanity. There was no time for argument. Ryan stepped forward, his expression resolute, his back straight as he approached the vortex. The energy field shimmered around him, and for a moment, the crew held their collective breath. Ryan, Green whispered, but the words died on her lips. She had seen the resolve in his eyes, the courage that had made him willing to face whatever came next. Ryan stepped into the heart of the vortex, his body enveloped by the swirling energy. The light flickered, and then, as if the very air held its breath, the vortex collapsed inward, swallowing him whole. The energy vanished, leaving behind a silence that felt both heavy and final. The crew stood motionless, their hearts heavy with the weight of Ryan's sacrifice. But as the silence lingered, something shifted. The monolith trembled, and the walls around them began to glow once more, the symbols of unity illuminating the path ahead. The voice of the entity returned, softer this time, almost reverent. You have passed the trial, it intoned. You have proven your worth. The path to your future is now clear. And as the monolith's final words echoed in their minds, the crew knew they had made it through the trial, not through power, not through knowledge, but through their willingness to sacrifice, to trust each other, and to honor the unity they had chosen. The future of humanity awaited them. But it would never be the same.